Tucson voters say yes to taxes for roads and public safety.
Public safety in 5 years, we should be pretty well caught up.
Decriminalizing mental illness, what we can learn from a Florida county's work.
We literally mapped out where the community mental health system intersected with the criminal justice system.
Plus, the end of the legislative session is a time to take stock of political relationships and policies. This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Andrea Kelly. Thanks for joining us. This week, voters in Tucson agreed to raise the sales tax for the next 5 years for some specific spending priorities. We'll ask how the city plans to get started on that spending after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
One day after Tucson voters approved a sales tax increase to pay for police and fire equipment and road repair, Pima County proposed a new way to pay for road work of its own. County Administrator Chuck Huckleberry wants the Board of Supervisors to consider a property tax rate increase when it tentatively approves its budget next week. County officials say Pima has few other options because the legislature has not increased the gasoline tax. Pima County estimates the increase would cost about $18 a year for the owner of a home valued at the median price of $132,000. If the supervisors approve, an estimated $100 million will be raised over 5 years. The Tohono O'odham Nation and state governments settled their dispute over the tribe operating a casino in the Metro Phoenix area. On Wednesday, the tribe announced that the gaming compact it has with the state will be amended to allow full gaming with a Class 3 certificate and a liquor license. In return, the tribe agrees not to operate any other gaming facilities in the Phoenix metro area. The state's opposition to the casino just outside the Glendale city limit had kept the casino at a lower level of gaming without a liquor license. And Arizona's unemployment rate did not change in April, remaining at 5%. Arizona's joblessness rate has been at 5% for 6 of the last 7 months, according to the state. For more on all of the week's top stories, visit our website.
The temporary half-cent of sales tax is expected to raise about $250 million in the next 5 years and will cost the average person about $3 a month. It will go to fund police and fire equipment and facilities and road work. If you shop in the city, you'll start paying that tax July 1st. So I asked City Manager Michael Ortega to explain the first thing the city will do with the money.
Well, some of the items that we'll be purchasing, the equipment for fire and the police vehicles, have long lead times. Some of them are up to 18 months. And so those we can order immediately and start getting those in the queue. So we'll get that decision made very, very soon so that we can start that clock and start that process moving. Then right after that, the council will be more than likely soliciting applications and interest in Bond Oversight Commission. And there's 2 of them. There's one for roads and there's also one for the public safety. And what that does is it gives us opportunity to fulfill the commitments that were made as a part of the ballot measure and making sure that the public has not only voice but has some eyes on what's going on.
Now, the sales tax starts in July.
July 1, that's correct.
So do you have to wait for that to accumulate a little bit before you can actually start spending some of it?
Sure. So to some level, we have obviously July 1, and we won't see much revenue until probably about September, October. But like I said, most of the larger purchases have long lead times. So we expect that we will have opportunity to accumulate enough cash for those purchases. It is a pay-as-you-go program, so we will accumulate and then spend down. But we believe that we can make some purchases / orders up front and make sure we can take advantage of the lead times now.
You mentioned that the oversight commissions will be making sure the city spends the money in the way that you promised to voters in the materials with the election. What if there's a shortfall in the revenue that you're expecting? What if you don't bring in as much as you thought you would?
Sure, and that was actually contemplated during the analysis and when we discussed this with the council. And so basically, if you look at the way it was projected, $50 million a year is based on half cent today. And is kind of a historic number that we've used, and there's not been an escalation that was built into that. So if you look at it simplistically, I didn't assume growth over the course of the 5 years. So if for some reason we don't reach our targets, I suspect that we'll at least break even to what we have today and those revenues. But let's say that we don't have the dollars come in the way we had hoped or we had projected. The way that it's structured, we have so many police vehicles, we have so many ballistic vests, we have so many cardiac monitors. We can scale back those numbers slightly in order to accomplish the, staying within the actual dollars we get from the sales tax.
Now, it's a 5-year plan, so the tax exists for 5 years. At the end of it, are there still going to be some capital needs for equipment, for roads that the city might come back and ask for more revenue?
Well, it's too early to tell. Obviously, 5 years is a long time, but clearly when you look at our capital needs, we have many capital needs. We focus primarily on the public safety on the roads. Roads will have needs for a long time. But public safety in 5 years, we should be pretty well caught up. There'll be a need for us to continue with the maintenance of those capital improvements. But we also have parks. We have a variety of parks that need to be improved. We have facilities across the city. We have our recreation centers. We have a variety of pools and things that need to be improved. But that's a conversation for 5 years from now. I think once we have we'll call it the public safety needs met, then we can have another conversation with the community and they can make a decision at that point.
Pima County is considering property tax revenue that would help it pay for the road repair that it needs. And of course, if it decides to go forward with that plan, some of that money would come to the city of Tucson because some Pima County property owners live in the city. Would you build that into this road plan, or what would you do with that funding?
Well, so I do understand there is a proposal that will be voted on by the Board of Supervisors in the near future, and the proposal is to allocate certain property tax revenues to road repair and maintenance. Obviously, our needs are many, and if you recall from some of the literature that we presented, we have needs in local roads of over $500 million. The sales tax will basically address somewhere around $100 million of that, and $40 million if you look at the local roads, the streets. So the county's allocation of dollars to the city is about $8 million, as I understand it, annually, which would certainly help and go towards that effort. We would support and certainly encourage, if that were to happen, for the existing Bond Oversight Commission that I mentioned earlier to be used to distribute those dollars based on need and based on the areas that we know have tremendous need today.
We'll hear more from Ortega about the city budget later in the show. Next, an update on a story we've been covering. Pima County has a grant to reduce its jail population. It's halfway through that 2-year effort to meet that goal. This week, the county held a conference on decriminalizing mental illness and brought in experts. Miami-Dade County, Florida Judge Stephen Leifman began tackling similar questions years ago.
Miami is unique in a lot of ways, and one of the ways that we are unique is we have the highest percentage of people with mental illnesses of any urban area in the United States. It's almost 2 to 3 times the national average. We have about 192,000 adults and 55,000 children who live and suffer with very serious mental illnesses. And unfortunately, Florida is about 51st per capita in mental health funding. So our jails have really become, unfortunately, the overwhelming place for people with mental illnesses.
After a difficult court case with a psychologist who had schizophrenia, Leifman knew the justice system and the healthcare system needed to work together better.
We literally mapped out where the community mental health system intersected with the criminal justice system. And what we found is we just did not. In many ways, we were embarrassingly dysfunctional. We were more part of the problem than part of the solution. And we were spending millions of dollars. People would come in, we'd order all these expensive evaluations, and then we couldn't do anything with them. We'd kick them back out to the street, and then we would punish them without giving them the services that they need because we'd rearrest them. It was just a horrible, horrible system. And sadly, that's fairly typical of the United States. And so what we decided we needed to do was have both a pre and post system, that we needed to educate our law enforcement to stop the flow into the system, and then when people did come in, to use better screening tools to figure out who shouldn't be there and then get them out quickly. So we now have the largest trained squad of what's called CIT officers, which stands for Crisis Intervention Team Policing, which you have here in Tucson. And that's a 40-hour training, and it teaches our law enforcement officers how to identify someone who's in crisis, how to de-escalate the situation, and where to take them as opposed to arresting them. We keep a lot of data, and so the outcomes have been miraculous. We have, over the last 6 years, our 2 largest departments combined did 71,600 and 28 mental health calls in 6 years.
And that's the law enforcement end, not the
That's
court
the law
end.
enforcement end. I mean, it just gives you an idea of the enormity of the problem in our community. But more impressively, out of those 71,628 cases, they only made 138 arrests. And so what happened is our jail audit plummeted. We went from well over 7,000 to about 4,000 today, and we closed one of our main jails. It's now been closed for almost 5 years. And while usually this is about cost shifting, when you actually close a jail, it's a cost savings of $12 million a year. So just that alone saved the county $60 million. And they have reinvested a lot of that money back into our programs to even do more. So it's had a wonderful impact. We then established 3 post-arrest diversion programs. So now anybody who gets arrested on a misdemeanor in Dade County, they're screened if they meet criteria for the program. Within 3 days of their arrest, they're taken to a crisis stabilization unit. Our staff goes and sees them after a few days when they've started to stabilize, and we offer them the opportunity to go into our program. And if they accept, which most of them do, they do not get rebooked back into the jail. They go directly from the crisis unit to the courtroom. When they get to the courtroom, a whole team's ready for them. We have a peer waiting for them. We got their benefits started to get lined up. We already have housing for them. We have all the essential elements they need for recovery.
Pima County is using Miami-Dade County as an example to learn from as Pima County works to reduce its jail population. So what examples do you see fitting here in Pima County from what the judge has described?
Well, I think it really is a model system, and a lot of it can fit in Pima County. We're not nearly as far along as they are in this kind of programming. But we do have the crisis intervention trained police officers here, and that's been going on for a number of years, and we have more and more trained every year. So we have had some success in de-escalating crises, having, fewer of the kind of standoffs, and those kinds of crisis situations have really been ameliorated in large part. And our police here are also able to take advantage of our crisis response center, which is a model center, and police and sheriff's deputies and all law enforcement can take individuals who are having a mental health crisis there instead of to the jail. And I believe that about 50% of their referrals come from police drop-offs. So that's been very successful. What we're doing right now that we've just begun is to start doing behavioral health screening, and it is post-booking, so it's similar to your post-booking program, in order to provide information to the judge at the individual's first court appearance about whether this person is appropriate for some kind of treatment for mental health or substance abuse, and to give the judge treatment options to say that the person will have access to treatment if the person is released, and that pretrial services can also provide a recommendation that it will supervise the person, so that gives the court assurance that the person will come back to court. And their treatment is largely funded because Arizona is a Medicaid expansion state and because there are services available through access for these people.
On that note, and I want to ask this of both of you, how do the potential changes to the U.S. healthcare system that are still being debated in Washington right now, which include potential impacts on Medicaid, how might those affect these plans in Pima and in Miami-Dade?
For this project, for us, that would be devastating if that level of care is withdrawn from adults, which is probably what would happen. If we lost the benefits of Medicaid expansion, most of this population is eligible for treatment because of Medicaid expansion. So it would be very difficult for us to continue the referrals.
It would be a major crisis. You would take people who were finally starting to get into recovery and get out of the criminal justice system, and you'd push them all in. Because under the new proposal, what happens is it allows the states to take mental health and substance abuse entirely out of Medicaid, and it becomes a state option and becomes an insurance option. And so if they don't want to pick up that option, there may be no services at all. And so for a state like Arizona that has expansion, they would lose twice as much as we would lose, but we would all lose a tremendous amount. And what people need to understand is that our counties right now are spending over $80 billion a year on correctional cost. And a lot of it is directly a result of untreated mental health and substance abuse. And so what will end up happening is they may think they're saving a few dollars on that end, but they're going to end up spending twice as much on another budget to take care of that population. Not giving people services is not going to make their illness go away. These are illnesses like any other illness. We wouldn't do that to people with cancer, we wouldn't do that to people with heart disease, and we shouldn't certainly do it with people with mental illnesses.
Wheeler says in the past 2 years, the jail population has fallen about 12%, or 250 people a day. Arizona lawmakers have been home for a full week now. Life is getting back to normal with jobs and families. Christopher Conover met with 2 Tucson freshman legislators months ago as they learned the ropes at the Capitol. He caught up with them again this week to see how their first session went.
In December, Tucson lawmakers Todd Clodfelter and Kirsten Engel were at the Capitol for new member orientation.
I actually do not yet have a badge. Can I get through?
Yeah, I can buzz you in there.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay.
And we were there when they got their office assignments.
So we're seeing it for the first time. You're seeing it with me in its empty state. So here it is.
And we got their assessments of learning the process.
It's like drinking from the fire hose. The protocol, the tradition of learning the procedures is, I won't say overwhelming, but it certainly is a massive information to try to consume.
After more than 120 days of work, the legislature is finished for this year.
Really?
So did the fire hose ever subside?
It did. It slowed down tremendously, probably the last, say, 4 weeks. The bills have been going through. There was still some pressure on some of the more contentious things, some that had been held back that required some amendments and discussion and the stakeholders to come in and do some negotiation. That was probably what kind of trickled through towards the end. But everything happens in the first few weeks.
Back in Tucson at their regular jobs, both members say being in the legislature lived up to their expectations.
It was tremendously exciting to be part of it. I enjoyed being up there, being able to speak out on the issues that I was elected to represent. There were ups and downs, there were cliffhangers. It was at times more exciting than I thought, and at times there'd be nothing going on and you'd be sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop on something.
The legislature can be a big place. Making friends takes work. So Representative Clodfelter went for a sure thing.
I have a popcorn machine in my office, an industrial popcorn machine like you would have at a carnival or at the movie theater. And every Tuesday and Thursday we would make popcorn and send out an email to all the members and the staff so they could come down and enjoy some hot, fresh popcorn. And initially some of the Democrats would walk by my office, they'd peek in, but they seemed a little reluctant. But as things progressed, they decided to start coming in and share the popcorn as well.
A little salt and butter made for better relationships across the political aisle. Representatives Engel and Clodfelter are from different parties, but they represent the same district. And they held a number of town halls together here in Tucson, a practice they'll continue this summer.
Christopher joins me now for more. So town halls, some politicians are cringing at the thought right now, but these two are holding bipartisan meetings with constituents. How's that working?
It seems to be working pretty well, but they're doing it on a fairly regular basis. They've held 4 of them since the beginning of the year, since they were sworn in. And also participating in those town hall meetings is State Senator David Bradley, also a Democrat, and he represents that same district just in the Senate. And the 3 of them get together and take questions and explain their votes if they don't line up, or explain their votes if they do line up, and let people know what's going on. They have one actually this Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning at the Kirk-Bear Canyon Library on the east side of Tucson, and both of them said they've had good turnouts, people have been wonderful, and it's something they plan on continuing doing. And you're right, it is something we don't see a lot of right now.
You mentioned that they are sometimes having to explain the votes they've taken. A Democrat and a Republican in the same district, have they sometimes voted together?
Absolutely, they have voted together. A lot of things pass the legislature with huge margins. We only hear about the things that are close very often, so they vote together on those. But what's interesting is Representative Clodfelter crossed party lines for one vote in particular this legislative session, and it was the vote on what are officially called the empowerment scholarships. vouchers to most people and the expansion of it. He crossed party lines and voted against them. Representative Engel, a Democrat, voted against them also. And when I was talking with Representative Claude Felter, he said that was probably the hardest vote he took this session because it was a priority of the governor's. He met with the governor in the governor's office and told him he wasn't going to be a yes vote. The governor called him on the day of the vote to see if he could get Representative Claude Felter into the yes column, and Representative Claude Felter said no. The head of the Arizona Republican Party called Representative Claude Felter and said, we need your vote. This is going to be really tight. And he stood his ground. He doesn't believe they need to be expanded the way they were being expanded. And he voted against it, which for a freshman is difficult.
Potentially risky for the political future.
Very, very much so. This is something that is popular within the Republican Party. Obviously not all parts of the Republican Party, but Representative Claude Felter said he heard a lot from the district, people calling him, emailing him, getting in touch with him, and it's not what the district wanted. So he believed that he should follow the district, and he didn't really like the full expansion anyway.
Maybe the value of some of those town halls.
Could be.
Let's switch to another policy issue at the legislature this session. This year, the Sheriff's Department in Pima County is getting a little bit of extra funding, which is always usually a good thing, but some people aren't quite happy about how that happened. So what is it and what's going down?
It involves what state lawmakers call GIDM funding, and that is anti-gang funding and anti-immigration funding. And the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office was in line to get $1.6 million. This is something that now former Sheriff Joe Arpaio used very widely during his time in office. This year, Maricopa County is getting $0 out of this fund, and $400,000 of it is coming down to Pima County. Sheriff Mark Napier, very happy to get that. And the rest is then going for the processing of rape kits that are stacking up and aren't being processed statewide. Sheriff Napier is very happy with the money. There's probably not a sheriff anywhere in the country, especially in Arizona, that if the legislature is going to give them an additional $400,000, they won't be happy to take it. But some people are concerned about this, and they see politics at play. Sheriff Arpaio, the former sheriff in Maricopa County, a Republican, Sheriff Penzone, the new sheriff in Maricopa County, a Democrat. We have the opposite here. Sheriff Napier is a Republican, the first Republican sheriff we've had in a while, and people see politics at play here, sweeping that money from the Democratic sheriff of Maricopa County and giving it to the Republican sheriff of Pima County. State Senator David Bradley and I had a discussion about that. And he said, well, it is great for the county, for Pima County. It might not be so good for the state overall. Sheriff Napier said he was happy with the money. He's not sure what he's going to do with it yet because it was a surprise, but he said he'll put it to good use.
And at the top of the show, of course, we talked about the city sales tax that passed an election this week. Now, the legislature passed a bill that is potentially awaiting signature on the governor's desk regarding those kinds of elections. It means this could be the last time Tucson votes in May?
That's exactly what this means. The legislature passed a bill, and it took some doing to pass it. It was pretty controversial, and it passed just barely, that requires municipalities, cities, counties, if they're going to hold an election involving a tax, like the one we had this week, you can't do it off-cycle. It has to be in November of an even-numbered year, which is when we have gubernatorial and presidential elections and things like that. They don't want them off-cycle like this special election we had this week. As you said, it's awaiting the governor's signature. If this had happened last year, we probably wouldn't have had this election, though my guess is the city of Tucson will challenge it, or Pima County, or somebody else will challenge it, as has happened in the past. But if it goes on the books, it could end this off-cycle special election to raise or lower a tax.
As Christopher mentioned, the legislature also made decisions that affect governments in southern Arizona. In the second part of my interview with City Manager Michael Ortega, we discussed state decisions that affect the city's $1.3 billion budget.
The first, obviously, is HERF, the Highway User Revenue Fund dollars that we receive for road maintenance. And the state, again, has allocated certain dollars for the cities and counties, much like what they did last year. They've matched what they gave us last year, which was good. There was a question about a reduction of that. And so it's unfortunate that we have to wait and worry up until the last minute and the last day of the session for us to determine exactly how much revenue will be given in order to maintain our roads. I mean, so that's just that part of it. You know, there's other pieces. There was discussions about impacts to state shared sales tax, state shared revenues, and so those are the kinds of conversations. Fortunately, we don't know of any impact beyond that at this point, and so it was a positive for us this year to not have any negative impacts from the legislature.
And when you say you're not sure yet, is that just it's too soon to tell because that budget has not gone into effect?
So from what we understand, we believe that the budget that the state has established is you know, revenue neutral to the city, and so we're hopeful that that will, once we see all of the detail of the budget, then we'll be able to make that determination. At this point, we're understanding that there won't be a negative impact to the city.
Ever since you became city manager, you have stated that it's been your goal to stabilize the city budget. The city was seeing year after year where it had to make cuts at the end of the year because it ended up having less revenue than it expected. So give me an update on your efforts to stabilize the city budget and have it be less volatile.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, I appreciate that it's my effort, but it really is a team effort. It's a team effort not only from the staff, but also the leadership of the council to stabilize the budget. And this is the second year that we'll have a structurally balanced budget. And it's something that we're all very proud of. You know, when you are able to make the adjustments within your budget and you know, live within your means, if you will, it really speaks to the leadership and the innovation and creativity that the staff and the council really have towards solving this. So if you look at our budget today, we actually have less employees by a few hundred than when we had a couple of years ago. We are expending less dollars across the board, and it's very difficult when you on an annual basis have to worry about revenues and costs. You know, we have our pension costs that are continually a challenge. We have our health insurance costs that are continually a challenge, and so that makes it very difficult for us looking forward. But because we're anticipating some of those costs into the future, we're providing strategies for amassing revenues now or revenue that we can use for those future costs in the future.
The state legislature this year passed a bill that regulates when cities can go to voters and ask for more money. So like this week's sales tax election was held in May of an odd-numbered year. This bill, if the governor signs it, would say that cities could only have elections in November of even-numbered years. So for example, the sales tax election would have had to be held in November of 16 or November of 2018. We don't know if the governor is going to sign it. If he does, will the city fight it in court?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that the legislature would, again, try to preempt local control. That should be a charter issue. That should be a local control issue. That should not be dictated to us by the state. And I think that the city council has been very clear that any attempt to affect our local control, the voters of Tucson speak when they adopt their charter. And if the charter provisions allow that, then that's the way it should be. And for the state to come in and try to make it more restrictive or to change that is really outside of the spirit and intent of local control. And so, you know, I can't suggest to you that the council would challenge it directly, but we do know that there are other cities that are very unhappy, including the League of Cities, and we'll probably be exploring options into the future.
And that would be a city council decision.
Absolutely, that would be a city council decision.
That's it for us. Next week, Vanessa Barchfield will delve into the city of South Tucson, from its history to its present budget challenges. We leave you now with an excerpt from an Arizona Illustrated story about the past and present of Canoa Ranch. Thanks for watching.
The ranch itself is full of interesting buildings, lots and lots of interesting history. This was the entrepreneurial center of southern Arizona. The Santa Cruz Valley is what actually made southern Arizona. It was the area where they were doing all kinds of ranching and mining and timber and all of those things that go along with it. And it's why people moved to southern Arizona. The folks that developed this, Levi Manning was the mayor of Tucson for a while. He developed the Tucson Water Company. They did many things to actually help benefit Tucson. There were stage stops down here. The Tarbox Hotel was down here. This part of the world, it's why we're here.